Welcome to R&R Livin' Life. In this episode, we continue our adventure into the Kimberley region. In our last episode, Rick and I had left you at Wallare Roadhouse near the banks of the Fitzroy River. What an amazing area this is. The historical building of Wallare Bridge Roadhouse were once the barracks of post-World War II British soldiers stationed at Tolgano, a tracking station for test flights of the famous Blue Streak project, a historical British medium-range ballistic missile program from the Cold War era. When the project ended in the 1970s, the town site of Tolgano was dismantled and the remnants became the roadhouse. Today we were again to cross the Fitzroy River, also known as Martuwarra, having crossed it in Fitzroy Crossing. This massive iconic river system, supported by 20 tributaries and a catchment area of over 90,000 square kilometres, flows 750 kilometres from the East Kimberley to King Sound, a large gulf in northern Western Australia. The river experiences massive and unpredictable floods, causing infrastructure damage and reshaping the landscape, as well as supporting huge wetlands. As we crossed the floodplains, we had to stop for a few single-lane bridges, with creeks and billabongs starting to dry back and wildlife beginning to congregate. Both the Meaney and Cockatoo bridges were reportedly damaged or destroyed during the unprecedented floods caused by ex-tropical cyclone Ellie. We passed the Kimberley Meatworks, established in 2016 by local cattle king Jack Burton under the control of parent company Eda Pastoral, the only abattoir servicing northern Western Australia for more than 2,000 kilometres. Unfortunately, the embattled company and its parent company were placed in voluntary administration in February 2024. Thankfully, in October 2025, the meatworks finally changed hands, with the abattoir tipped to reopen in the second half of 2026. We had planned to camp at the Roebuck Plains Roadhouse caravan park for a few days while we explored the area. The roadhouse is located just off the Great Northern Highway, about 35 kilometres from Broome. Originally built in the mid-1980s, the roadhouse is one of the major truck stops between Perth and Darwin. Later that afternoon, as we relaxed, plumes of smoke could be seen from reduction burning that was happening to the east of the caravan park. The following day we made our way into Broome. The town is located on a peninsula where the Indian Ocean meets the Kimberley region, with approximately 900 kilometres of coastline. Our first stop was at Town Beach, also known as the Old Jetty area, the original port of Broome, located on the southeastern edge of the town, overlooking the stunning turquoise-coloured Roebuck Bay. I was captivated by the colour of the water, especially against the rich red dunes along the beach area along the foreshore of the bay. It truly was a dramatic scene. While standing at the end of the jetty, Rick and I got to see green turtles frolicking in the water. What a way to spend a morning, taking in such a vivid view. Town Beach is also the location of a small cemetery, the Broome Pioneer Cemetery, of just 11 grave sites, as well as memorial plots and commemorative sites. The first graves at this site were of a man who had died at sea, with the first burial taking place in 1883, the same year that Broome was gazetted as a town. The area is also home to a significant 1942 war memorial, primarily known as the 9 Zeros 9 Stories artwork, which commemorates the Japanese air raid on March 3, 1942. The memorial serves as a silent reminder of the estimated 88 people who were killed during the raid, including many Dutch civilians, women and children, who were evacuated from the Dutch East Indies, now called Indonesia. Rick and I spent time wandering the jetty, memorial and cemetery before we became a little concerned by the huge clouds of smoke towards the roadhouse, so decided to make our way back to check on Gidget. Reduction burning was being carried out along the highway just east of the roadhouse. Once we had reassured ourselves that there was no danger, we decided to finish the afternoon by driving down the highway towards Sandfire Roadhouse across Roebuck Plains. The plains in the name is associated with wetlands situated adjacent to Roebuck Bay. Roebuck Plains Station is a pastoral lease located close to the township of Broome, originally acquired and developed by Perlers, Streeter and Company to supply meat to Broome, with a slaughterhouse established on the outskirts of the town to process the cattle and sheep that were raised on the property. The station is located approximately 30 kilometres east of Broome and occupies an area of 2,760 square kilometres on a rich marine floodplain and is said to be able to support around 20,000 head of cattle. The property is a mixture of floodplains and sandy red soil country. The flat or gently undulating land lacks prominent landmarks, with usually red sandy soils with a high clay content, low in nutrients, and susceptible both to drought and to waterlogging when wet. Rick and I had lived on Downs country on the Barkly Tablelands, but this was next level. The Indigenous Land Corporation acquired Roebuck Plains Station in 1999, and in 2006 the federal court determined the station was the exclusive possession of the Yawuru under native title. In 2014, the Indigenous Land Council handed the lease back to the traditional owners, only to have the management of the station handed back to them. In what is a rarity, Roebuck Plains has an Indigenous protected area on the property, where cattle are not pushed off but managed in a way that both pastoralism and environmental protection have a place. Alongside the stockmen are rangers or country managers who do water surveillance, pasture monitoring, burning off and in-depth tracking of the land to ensure if areas are being overgrazed or suffering, with areas then fenced off and protected. We drove about 50 kilometres down the highway towards Sandfire Roadhouse before turning around and returning to Gidget. The country was very different once we left the plains. We drove through low and open woodlands of scattered trees dominated by wattles with eucalypts and tall shrubs, with the understory containing grasses and herbage. We could see where wildfires had left areas of blackened dead shrubs. On higher ridges the red sandy soil was covered with more open savanna-type vegetation of mixed woodland grasslands ecosystems, while on low-lying ground subject to waterlogging during the wet season, paper barks replaced other tree species. Rick and I were intrigued by the short cement pylons along the highway, only to learn that they are the remains of telephone poles. Around 1871, a second cable connected Java with an overland line from Perth to Roebuck Bay, with a third cable to complement the first two coming ashore in 1887-88. This 1,650 kilometre undersea cable was laid to increase security in communications by avoiding disruptions from seismic activity that kept breaking the cable, and began operations in February 1889, offering Western Australia an alternate international path that was independent of the existing link via Adelaide to Darwin. Once ashore, the line consisted of a single wire supported on patent iron poles placed about 5 miles inland from the coast. These cables served their purpose until 1919, once telephones developed. Then, in the early 1970s, the line was replaced by a chain of microwave radio relays. We enjoyed driving back across the plains and found it just as fascinating. On our return to Gidget, we enjoyed a very blood-red sunset because of all the reduction burning happening in the area. In some ways, It was very eerie. The following day we made our way back through Broome to Ganthium Point. The point encompasses a stretch of white sandy beach as well as a red rock cliff face overlooking the turquoise waters of the Indian Ocean. The contrasting colours of the deep pendant red cliffs and the shimmering turquoise ocean was breathtaking. From the beach area we made our way past the Broome Turf Club, carved out of the bushland at Ganthium Point, with a red dirt track. At Ganthium Point we first saw the chimney from an old lighthouse keeper's house and the new lighthouse keeper's residence. Further around the corner was a tower with an osprey's nest with two little chicks. We followed the path further along to the spectacular sandstone promontory, a stunning headland of Broome sandstone, having been deposited in shallow water in the area in the early Cretaceous period, about 130 million years ago. The dramatic red cliffs were highlighted by the turquoise ocean. Our aim was to see if we could see the long extinct dinosaur footprints and a few plant fossils at the bottom of the cliffs. The prints have been preserved in the reef rocks for over 125 million years. Unfortunately, they can only be seen on a very low tide, and the road further around the promontory was closed. But I can honestly say the sandstone cliffs were stunning. The lighthouse was commissioned in 1905 and was one of 10 built between 1900 and 1913. Rick and I were thrilled to see the two osprey chicks high up on the tower and an adult returning with a caught fish. Rick and I spent quite some time wandering and clambering over the rocks of the promontory. The layers of sandstone were remarkable, quite different from the basalt rocks on the shoreline of the beach. The weathering of the sandstone was impressive, as was the colours in the layers. It really was interesting seeing just how weathering and erosion had sculptured the area. Rick went and stood on the cliff edge in one spot, but I was not going there. I am continually surprised by the impact that Mother Nature has on carving, shaping, and influencing the landscape, defining and sculpturing it into the most amazing scenes. From the point we made our way to the port area on the northwest shore of Roebuck Bay. Originally built in 1897, the wharf is a steel pile structure with a concrete deck and spring fending and is over 500 metres long, supporting two operational terminals. The port exports bulk mineral sands and cattle, as well as services fishing, pearling, cruises and charter vessels. It also supports the offshore oil and gas industry. The Port of Broome has one of the largest tidal ranges in the Kimberley. Again, we were unlucky as the walkway was being renovated and closed to the public. After checking out Roebuck Bay from the car park near the Border Force building, we were on the move again. From the port area we made our way to Cable Beach, famous for its stunning sunsets, white sand, clear water and iconic camel rides. But, being the middle of the day, we didn't see the sunsets or take a camel ride. Bounded by sand dunes and ochre red cliffs, Cable Beach is as nature intended, pristine. Unfortunately, as with other pristine areas, redevelopments always seem to happen. We wanted the top of the dunes overlooking the long stretch of white sand edged by the stunning, tranquil turquoise waters of the Indian Ocean. It was here that in 1889 a telegraph undersea cable was laid from Broome to East Java, connecting to England. It was here that the cable came ashore, hence the name Cable Beach. The beach itself is over 22 kilometres in length, with pristine white sand washed by tides that can reach over 9 metres. With so many people frequenting the cafe area on the top of the dunes, Rick and I decided to move on. Our next stop was at Roebuck Bay Lookout in Chinatown, with spectacular sweeping scenic views over the bay and Dampier Creek. The lookout was collaboratively designed, celebrating the rich Aboriginal history of this significant cultural site. It features artwork and interpretive information created by the traditional owners in conjunction with Broome Senior High School. From the lookout we made our way back into Chinatown, that has been the multicultural heart and soul of Broome since the pearling crews set up their first camps and corrugated tin sheds in the 1880s. We wandered the boutique retail hub and site of historical significance. In Johnny Chi Lane were 20-story panels on the walls of the laneway telling the history of the area and of Johnny Chi, a pearler with an interesting history who lived near the area where the laneway is today. There were also many significant artworks scattered around Chinatown. Alas, I did not buy any pearls. On our way back to Gidget, Rick and I decided to stop in and check out the bird observatory. What an interesting road Crab Creek Road turned out to be. From being very sandy to heavily corrugated, and when we were there had numerous deep wet bog holes. The observatory was established in 1988 by scientists who recognised the immense value of Roebuck Bay as a migratory shorebird area, as the Broome region is a very diverse area where the desert meets the tropics on the shores of the Indian Ocean. Various environments including mudflats, the ocean, mangroves, the sandy and often cliff-back beaches, floodplains, salt marshes, savanna, desert scrub and pinden woodlands coexist within the region. Roebuck Bay is one of the world's most important sites for migratory shorebirds that feed on the bay's rich tidal flats and roost on the beaches around the area. Rick and I were looking forward to seeing some of the amazing birds in the area, but as soon as we exited the boat we were swarmed by mosquitoes. Flies in outback Australia were nothing compared to the mosquitoes we encountered. We even plastered ourselves with bushman repellent, but that did not have any effect, so did not stop for long. I did get to take some photos from a parking area along the cliffs. Once back on the highway, we then stopped at Malcolm Douglas Crocodile Farm to check it out, but again, the mosquitoes were horrendous. We sat in the car trying to decide if we would go in while watching groups of people waving. In the end, we decided we would not enjoy it while having to deal with the mosquitoes. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Give us a thumbs up if you have. Join us next time as we make our way to Derby, Birdwood Downs and back to Mary Pools. Live life to the full. Cheers for now. Rick and Rosemary. R&R, living life.